I was a comic book kid. An avid one. We're talking early to mid-90s. The peak of foil covers, trading cards, holograms, and characters dying just to come back a few issues later. But despite the stacks of long boxes I filled in those years, the Punisher wasn't really on my radar. My shelves were crowded with brooding Batman story arcs and colorful, mutant-powered X-Men team-ups. Not a lot of room for a gun-toting vigilante in a skull t-shirt who solved problems with bullets instead of banter. So, coming into the Punisher on NES, I wasn't riding a wave of childhood nostalgia. What I was expecting, however, was, well, trouble. Because there it is on the cartridge. The LJN logo. A badge of dishonor among retro gamers. The kind of logo that makes you brace for janky controls, confusing mechanics, and an adaptation that somehow misses the point entirely. But LJN working with a Marvel IP? That's a combo that at least piques curiosity. Was this going to be another licensed misfire, or a rare case where LJN delivered something halfway decent? I fired it up to find out. Before we continue, I'm going to direct you to, you know what's coming. The description. Background viewing, check it out. Let's get on to the basics. The Punisher for the NES is a rail shooter. Not literal rails, but close enough. You move forward automatically through city streets, warehouses, and enemy-infested strongholds, taking out bad guys with a supply of lead and the occasional grenade. What makes it unique is the behind-the-shoulder perspective. You see Frank Castle from the back, center screen, as you guide both his movement and aim using the D-pad. Shooting and grenades are mapped to the two-face buttons. It's a control setup that works surprisingly well, once you accept that a Zapper-compatible version just wasn't gonna happen. And yes, it's an LJN game. That often means low expectations. But to its credit, this one mostly functions like a game should. The difficulty leans classic NES. Not impossible, but you'll need quick reflexes, patience, and a decent sense of ammo conservation to get anywhere. Pickups like health, ammo, armor, extra lives float by and must be shot to collect. You'll also find newspaper clippings that offer hints, some useful, some cryptic, and the occasional go arrow that opens a side path to a bonus area. Overview. In The Punisher, you're not just shooting through levels, you're bringing vigilante justice to the streets, one dead-eyed mobster at a time. As Frank Castle, you proceed into danger, gun drawn, facing wave after wave of goons, ninjas, flamethrower guys, and heavily armored mini-bosses, all while trying to dodge return fire and make out the occasional floating health kit in the chaos. The game's structure gives you a bit of freedom. Choose one of 3 available missions from the outset. Each mission has 2 or 3 stages, ending in a boss fight against something appropriately over the top. Helicopter, tank, or a classic comic book villain. It's not yet clear to me if there's a final mission beyond those 3. The game feels short if there isn't, but making it through all of them in one go, it's no small feat. In classic NES shooter fashion, everything's handled under pressure. You shoot pickups to collect them, shoot newspapers to grab tips, and sometimes shoot a go arrow to veer off into a bonus area. Those off-path zones seem to offer better item drops and lighter resistance, but that's from my observation. Not necessarily a guarantee. And while the overall feel is straightforward, walk, shoot, dodge, survive, there's enough layered in to reward good play. Finish a stage efficiently, and you'll be gifted extra ammo, more points, and sometimes even extra lives. My youthful experience. None. I never played the Punisher as a kid. I do recall seeing ads for it, probably in the manuals of other LJN games, maybe in a comic book or two. The advertising had that loud, punchy, buy this now energy, but despite all the action-packed imagery, it never really grabbed me. At the time, I had no idea LJN had a bad reputation. That realization came years later, well after my NES days were over. Back then, it was just another rainbow logo on a cartridge. And while I was definitely a comic book fan, the Punisher wasn't in my crosshairs. He was overshadowed by my steady diet of Batman and X-Men. So this one passed me by completely. No nostalgia filter here, just a clean first-time run, decades after the fact. The look. The Punisher on NES isn't exactly a feast for the eyes, but it gets the job done. The title screen and intro are actually pretty strong, like something pulled from the cover of a Punisher comic. It still looks like 8-bit artwork, of course, but it delivers a bit of theatrical flair, almost like a low-bit trailer for an MCU-style coming attraction, just done within NES limitations. Some gameplay screens manage to look surprisingly sharp, while others dissolve into a clutter of pixel noise. The environments shift enough to avoid monotony, but nothing really sticks with you as a visual standout. Frank Castle himself looks decent from the over-the-shoulder perspective, but only has a few poses. I say poses deliberately here, because it doesn't feel like animation so much as flipping between a small set of iconic stances. It gets the job done, but don't expect fluidity. Enemies are easy enough to distinguish in the heat of battle, and explosions and effects are functional, but not flashy. Bosses like helicopters and tanks add some visual variety, though they're not especially detailed. Considering how many sprites are moving around at once, flicker is fairly minimal. Better than expected for an NES title. You'll still see a little stutter when things get crowded, but it's surprisingly well managed given the system's limitations. Sound. The audio design in The Punisher is a strange beast. There's some genuinely moody, atmospheric music at the start and end of the game. Different tunes, both of which do a decent job of setting a gritty urban tone. Boss fights also get their own musical cues, reinforcing that you've entered the "this is serious now" moment. But between those highlights, it's eerily quiet. Most of the game leaves you with little more than the sounds of gunfire. Even that's a mixed bag. Your own shot sounds solid and distinct, while enemy gunfire has its own unique audio signature, which is actually kind of helpful for gameplay, even if it doesn't sell the realism. Grenades, meanwhile, sound like someone cracking open a fizzy soda. Not exactly the thunderous boom you might expect from battlefield explosives. The silence is so pronounced that it actually becomes part of the atmosphere. It's not a flaw so much as a stylistic choice, but one that might not land for everyone. And then there's the saxophone player. Yes, at certain points, a lone jazz musician shows up mid-level, playing a cool little riff. It's a rare and oddly stylish moment. But if you shoot him, intentionally or by a twitch reflex mistake, the music doesn't stop abruptly. Instead, it dies out slowly, almost mournfully. A small detail, but a surprisingly effective one. All in all, the sound is minimalist, but not careless. You get a sense that they were trying to use silence and sharp audio cues as part of the experience. Whether it works or not depends on your expectations. Gameplay. The Punisher is a rail shooter with a twist. You don't just aim, you also dodge. The action plays out from a third-person over-the-shoulder view with Frank Castle visible in front of the crosshairs. The D-pad lets you move him left and right to avoid enemy fire and control your aim, which makes for a tense balancing act. The A and B buttons are used for shooting and throwing grenades. At first glance, you might wonder why this wasn't a zapper game. Feels like it should be. But given the need for dual-purpose control, movement, and aiming, implementing zapper support would have been a logistical mess, unless it was redesigned entirely for first-person view or forced players to juggle both a controller and a light gun. In that context, the choice makes more sense. There are 3 missions to choose from, each containing multiple stages. Whether there's more beyond these missions is unclear to me. As of this recording, I haven't managed to complete all 3 without a game over. But progress is rewarded. The better you do in a stage, the more goodies you receive at the end. Bonus points, extra ammo, even, sometimes, an additional life. Pickups like armor, health, and ammo are collected by shooting them, which makes sense in this genre. Another example of something video game logic accepts, but would never be effective in the real world. You'll also see newspapers hiding mid-stage that contain cryptic tips, sometimes obvious, sometimes surprisingly subtle. But taking a moment to read while dodging bullets, it's easier said than done. Ammo conservation is crucial. Run out and your shots slow to a pitiful crawl. It's not quite a game over, but it is a significant handicap. Occasionally you'll come across a flashing go arrow. Shoot it to enter a bonus world. These side areas offer a break from the main action, and while they don't always feel like true bonuses, they seem to contain fewer enemies and some more useful drops. Though that may be anecdotal based on my limited attempts. Boss fights cap off the final stage of each mission and offer a change of pace. Helicopter, tank, and one brutal thug. These add variety, and each requires a little trial and error to figure out. They're not brutally hard, but they break up the action nicely and give the gameplay a bit more personality. All told, it's classic NES shooter fare. Simple on the surface, harder than it looks. Though my early impression is it's easier than the traditional NES hard, and more mechanically demanding than it seems at first glance. Whether or not you enjoy that depends largely on your appetite for on-rail shooters and how you feel about multitasking with limited controls. Other. In true Punisher fashion, the game mostly avoids moral nuance, except for one moment, that saxophone player. He's the lone, innocent bystander, and if you shoot him, not only does his street performance music fade out in a somber, almost mournful way, you take a huge chunk of damage. It's a strange, oddly artistic choice for a game like this, and one of the few moments where the game tries to tug at something resembling a conscience. It's easy to imagine a better fit for this game on the Super Nintendo. With shoulder buttons available, you could separate dodging and aiming, maybe even maintain aim lock while ducking out of the way. Of course, you'd need a claw grip or an extra thumb, but at least the hardware would support the idea more gracefully. A quirky thought, but even the Atari 7800 might have been a better fit for this game, at least visually. It could handle more simultaneous sprites without flicker, which would benefit the Punisher's onslaught of enemies and bullets. Of course, the trade-off would be audio. But the 7800's ancient sound chip might actually suit this game's long stretches of silence just fine. But don't expect it to do too much justice to those moody intro tunes or saxophone laments. The optional go arrows take you into extra areas, though calling them bonus stages might be a stretch. I've mentioned this before, but they do seem to offer better item pickups, lower enemy density. But it's not always clear whether entering one is worth the detour. Still, they break the monotony and reward exploration, however lightly. Me, myself, and sometimes you. The Punisher is strictly a one-player experience. No co-op, no versus modes, no multiplayer extras. The solitary nature fits the grim tone of Frank Castle's lone crusade against crime. Playing solo means all the pressure is on you. Aiming, dodging, and managing resources all at once. It can get pretty intense, especially as stages progress and enemy fire ramps up. For those who thrive on mastering reflexes and memorizing enemy patterns, this can be rewarding. For others, it may lean towards frustration, particularly since running out of ammo significantly hampers your ability to keep pace. There's a subtle pacing to the game that encourages you to get better. Not just survive, but excel to reap bonuses like extra ammo and lives, which can be the difference between finishing a mission or seeing a game over. While I didn't grow up with this game, playing it now feels like a decent challenge that respects the single-player format without trying to shoehorn multiplayer gimmicks. If you enjoy classic NES shooters and can handle a bit of trial and error, this solo journey might be right up your alley. Who would enjoy this? I'll be honest, this style of shooter isn't usually my thing. I'm more into the vertical and horizontal arcade-style blasters than these over-the-shoulder rail-based shoot-'em-ups. That said, the Punisher plays well enough and feels beatable enough to earn a spot on the occasional play rotation. Fans of this specific shooter subgenre will likely appreciate what's here. Die-hard Punisher fans, especially those with nostalgic for the grittier comic book era, won't have much trouble justifying the cartridge's presence in their collection. And yes, it has the infamous LJN logo, but compared to their street cred, this one's surprisingly competent. In short bursts, both in terms of session length and how often you revisit it, the Punisher can hold your attention. If you're turned off by gun-centric gameplay, fair enough. This one won't change your mind. But for nearly everyone else, it's worth at least a tryout. It's not jaw-dropping, but it delivers more quality than you might expect, based on reputation alone. Legacy. It's hard to predict the future of the Punisher, both the character and the intellectual property. On the one hand, the MCU continues to dominate pop culture, and the broader genre of superhero and vigilante justice stories still has momentum. But how permanent is that trend? Comics themselves are becoming more niche, and their cultural footprint is shrinking year by year. As for the Punisher specifically, that's a much more complicated question. Society's evolving views on gun violence and media representation make the future of a character like Frank Castle uncertain. We're in the middle of a cultural shift, potentially. And it's difficult to say whether the Punisher will someday be viewed as a relic of questionable taste or remain insulated by the "it's just fiction" defense that shields many over-the-top action icons of the past. This particular NES game, though, I don't see much of a legacy forming. It's a footnote, one remembered by a small, nostalgic group of fans, but unlikely to be rediscovered or celebrated by future generations. Once those few loyal players set down the controller for good, this cartridge may quietly fade into obscurity. Overall, The Punisher for NES isn't a great game, but it's definitely better than I expected. It's a rail shooter, which isn't a game I usually chase after. It stars a character I never really followed, and it's published by LJN, whose name alone tends to trigger a reflexive wince from retro fans. Cue that notorious chorus in your head. Thanks, Biggie. And yet, it works. Sort of. The gameplay is solid, the presentation does what it can within 8-bit limits, and the difficulty feels fair in that classic NES kind of way. It's not remarkable, and it's definitely not a hidden gem. But it's not garbage either. Not by a long shot. Even though it's not really my style, I do plan to pop this card in a few more times just to see how far I can get. That alone speaks to a level of quality I wasn't expecting. It may not blow you away, but if you give it a chance, it might just surprise you too. Thanks for watching, and as always, see you next mission. The video computer system conversion of Atari's most iconic arcade hit marks the latest target in Triple Nine's Retro Game Review series. Starting 2026 with a 2600 title, that's no accident. And with a name that just so happens to start with A? If only there were 25 more letters to keep that theme going. Background viewing. While there are plenty of reviews for this game, there are also plenty of documentations about the development process for this port. From ambition, creativity, setbacks, and approval from management, I think the story outshines any individual review of the game. While I will hint at and allude to some of these things, a much more comprehensive presentation of the story of Asteroids for the 2600 can be found in the description below. So go ahead, give Atari Archive some attention. It is well deserved and well worth your time. Basics. Asteroids for the Atari 2600 is a single-screen space shooter based on Atari's smash hit arcade game from 1979. This home version was published by Atari and released in 1981, right around the peak of the VCS's popularity. You pilot a small cosmic spacecraft, as stated in the manual, at least in the backstory. The rest of the manual officially refers to it as your spaceship and your ship. Reportedly the result of a caffeine-fueled naming session in Sunnyvale, where the lore writer was clearly denied access to the conference room at Atari headquarters. Under certain circumstances, a satellite or UFO will occasionally enter the field, depending on what you have your difficulty switch set to, offering a chance to earn extra points, or get vaporized in the process. As with the arcade original, clearing a wave brings in a new one, faster and meaner. It's a simple formula with just enough ramping tension to keep you alert. Overview. Like its arcade counterpart, the 2600 version of Asteroid tasks you with a simple but addictive goal. Survive as long as you can while racking up points by blasting drifting space rocks and the occasional enemy ship. Each large asteroid breaks into smaller ones, multiplying the danger and the scoring potential. It's space janitorial work with a body count. The game is played with the standard joystick controller, although you and I already know. Plug in your Genesis controller for this one. With the one button used to fire and directional control handling rotation and thrust, and featured action, it's a pared down adaptation compared to the arcade original, but it retains the same core loop. Shoot, dodge, survive, repeat, then do it again and again. Points are awarded based on what you destroy. Large, medium, and small asteroids, satellites, and UFOs each have different values. Score high enough and you'll earn extra lives at regular intervals, giving you just enough rope to vaporize yourself with confidence. This game includes 66 variations, offering different combinations of difficulty, ship behavior, feature action, and number of players. I'll get into those a little bit later, but it's safe to say this cartridge is doing a lot with what it has. Like in the arcade, the screen wraps around. You can fly off one edge and reappear on the other, as can the asteroids. That constant wraparound adds a layer of tension and strategy, especially when fragments you thought you'd dodge suddenly sneak back in from the other side. And the light bulb moment when you realize your shots can wrap around too. Weak gaming now. Console switches. Power. Turns the game on. If this surprises you, I envy your journey. TV type. Toggles between color and black and white palettes, or at least that was the original intention. Its functionality is disabled in this game, one of the very first titles for the VCS to do so. Difficulty. Each player has their own difficulty switch. B is without enemy spacecraft, while A adds UFOs and satellites, for those craving a bit more chaos. Select. Cycles through the 66 game variations. You can speed this up by holding select and reset at the same time, which is as close as this game gets to a quality of life user experience. Reset starts the game. It's the one you'll keep reaching for after an untimely collision with a fast-moving pebble. My youthful experience. Cirrus, Pallas, Vesta. You know them by name because your passion for astronomy rivals mine. I'm sure. My love for space and my love for video games both date back to the mid-1980s. Two interests that often ran in parallel and occasionally intersected. Asteroids on the 2600 was one of those intersections. I must have been 7 or 8 when I added it to my small but growing collection. It wasn't the flashiest cartridge on the shelf, but it had staying power. Even if I didn't reach for it every time, whenever I did, it delivered. Solid gameplay, a decent challenge, and the kind of simple loop that kept me going for longer stretches than most Atari titles. Especially once I figured out how to stay alive a little longer than usual. I don't have vivid memories tied to it. No specific rainy Saturday night or high-score showdown comes to mind. But I remember the feeling. Focused, calm, probably leaning too close to the screen, trying to make one more shot count before the screen filled with rocks again. That's enough. That feeling stuck. The look. By today's standards, Asteroids on the 2600 will probably catch some flack for sprite flicker, minimal detail, and the usual retro shaming that early VCS titles tend to endure. But for its time, and for its hardware, this looks really good. Your ship, or space triangle if you're feeling abstract, looks like it came straight from Space War. We'll get to the physics that were potentially borrowed as well later, but visually, it gets the job done. The real visual standout is the asteroids themselves. Not only are they appropriately jagged and rocky, okay, perhaps lumpy works better, they're absurdly colorful. Shooting them feels like shattering a bag of Skittles at terminal velocity. Blast the rainbow! I've counted 8 different asteroid colors overall, with up to 6 different hues of rocky bodies on the screen at the same time. And that's just from a brief observation. Can you count more? By alternating which frame the game draws certain sprites on, a clever way to get around hardware limits, along with other tactics like bank switching, Asteroid accomplishes far more than the hardware was designed for. Yes, it has flicker, but in this case, it's a deliberate, effective compromise that lets the screen stay busy without crashing the whole operation. Thanks to image persistence, this flickering isn't bad at all, if you're playing as originally intended, on a tube television. Any flicker criticisms today are enhanced by modern displays, but on a CRT, the flickering just makes the sprite look a tad translucent. Flicker will be a distracting artifact in future titles I will cover, but for Asteroids, it's done well. It makes Asteroids a playable adaptation of the arcade game, on the 2600 no less. Enjoyable, and it's given its own identity. Asteroids on the 2600 doesn't rely on the name alone to sell copies. This game was made to be played. Enemy spacecraft, like the UFOs and satellites, are crisply drawn and move with purpose. Everything reads clearly, and the pitch-black backdrop? That's not a design shortcut. It's the vacuum of space. I mean, the Hubble Space Telescope hadn't launched yet, so there were no pillars of creation or deep field to slap in the background anyway. You get black. Deal with it. Sound. The first thing you'll probably notice, or feel, is the game's heartbeat. As you clear more asteroids, this ominous background pulse starts to quicken. It's not just a sound cue, it's a rising sense of pressure, ticking upward with each fragment cleared, letting you know you're almost done. And also, probably about to get obliterated by a rogue pebble drifting in from the screen. Once you're locked in, you'll hear the usual suspects. Your shots make a crisp little pew. that's more sci-fi than firepower. And explosions, whether you're hitting rocks, UFOs, or just dying heroically, come with a thick, crunchy detonation noise that feels way more impactful than it has any right to. It's the audio equivalent of snapping a graham cracker over a campfire. The enemy spacecraft bring their own flavor to the mix. UFOs have a distant, high-pitched siren, while satellites give off more of a warbly, low-register hum. It's subtle, but they're distinct. And when either one shows up, it instantly puts you on edge. Not bad for a console whose sound chip has all the nuance of a dot matrix printer in action. Played back on magnetic audio tape. There's no music, of course. This is Asteroids. No ambient synths, no dramatic fanfare, just bleeps and boops. The kind of sound design that yells, function over form, louder than your triangle ship ever could. In space, no one can hear you scream, or explode. But if sound could propagate in the vacuum, the explosions here might actually be pretty close. Crunchy, abrupt, and satisfying in a weirdly tactile way. Technically inaccurate? Sure. But also, who cares? This is a video game, not a physics lecture, and these sound effects aren't just good for the 2600. They're genuinely effective. An attribute, not a nitpick. Gameplay. Asteroids for the 2600 keeps the same general loop as its arcade ancestor. Rotate, thrust, shoot, survive. But this is the VCS. So it comes with quirks, trade-offs, and its own peculiar charms. You control your cosmic spacecraft. Yeah, it's the official title the manual uses briefly before settling into your ship, like a normal person. You control your cosmic spacecraft using the joystick's left and right directions to rotate your ship counterclockwise or clockwise. Pushing up applies thrust, lumbering, weighty, glorious thrust. The sense of inertia is fantastic. Once you're moving, you keep moving, unless something kills you, or you start inexplicably slowing down. Realistic space physics? Mostly. Realistic space physics with just enough imaginary drag to keep things playable? Absolutely. Pressing down on the joystick triggers a special feature, depending on the game mode. Hyperspace, shields, 180-degree turn, or nothing. Let's break them down. Hyperspace. The arcade classic. It doesn't randomly vaporize you like in the coin-op, but it will sometimes drop you directly in front of an oncoming rock, so the same chaotic energy applies. Think of it as a fast travel lottery to your funeral. Shields. A defensive feature that keeps you safe. Briefly. You can use it safely for up to 2 seconds, but if you cross that threshold, kaboom. It's a shield with a ticking timer strapped to it. Use wisely. 180 flip. Instantly flips your ship to face the opposite direction. Ideal for aggressive gameplay, or when you just can't be bothered to rotate normally. No feature. Self-explanatory. In a universe with infinite possibilities, you choose none of the above. The action button fires your shots. Up to 2 can exist on screen at once, which is half the firepower of the arcade version. But considering the 2600 is busy juggling rainbow rocks and flickering enemies, you'll take what you can get. As for the asteroids themselves, blasting a large rock splits it into 2 mediums. Hitting a medium converts it into a small one. Hitting a small one removes it from existence entirely. Basic space geology. Hitting asteroids will slightly alter their trajectory. A nice physics touch, which is either tactical brilliance or chaos theory, depending on how much credit you're willing to give yourself. The arcade version escalates by piling on more and more rocks, but the 2600 caps large asteroids at 8 on screen at a time. That's not laziness, it's mercy. Or limitation-induced. Choose your own reality here. Enemy spacecraft, UFOs or satellites, can also appear if the difficulty switch is set to A. And yes, they're dangerous, but they are often irrelevant too. Regardless, they're worth big points, which makes them delightfully dangerous. Or so it would seem. They traverse the screen mostly horizontally, shooting without purpose or discretion, often not threatening you at all. They'll either get taken out by an asteroid, your shot, or make it to the other side unscathed. While you can die to them, the threat is more implied than real. The excitement of a point surge can distract you enough to lose a ship far more often than them dealing a fatal blow to you with anything resembling precision shooting. And while we're at it, here's a touch of strategy. While the controls are fun and have a surprising amount of finesse, they're undercut slightly by the game's technical bias. Vertical motion is evidently easier for the 2600 to handle than horizontal, so staying towards the center and shooting asteroids to either side is often the safest play. It turns out the most dangerous part of space is the left and right edges. So we mentioned there are 66 game variations in total. Combinations of different speeds, extra life thresholds, every 5k, 10k, or 2k points, or never, and featured actions, which I described all of 0 minutes ago. Okay, maybe one. Speaking of features, Asteroids is equipped with Teddy Bear Mode, a beginner-friendly setup for children. It's a nice gesture, but it dumbs things down so much it feels like putting training wheels on a shopping cart. Sure, it moves, but it's not going to take you anywhere interesting. And remember, you've got those difficulty switches. If you've only been looking at the game select matrix in the manual, you're only seeing half of the possibilities. Although, if you're considering playing on difficulty B, okay, fine. You do you. Learning the controls takes time, especially the strange rotational physics and delayed acceleration. But once it clicks, it really clicks. Understanding spawns and movement quirks make this version more predictable than the arcade, and honestly, easier to get deep into. The don't move unless absolutely necessary strategy, although effective, it does dampen the dynamic physics of this game. You can survive much longer, but lose the challenge of thrust and inertia management. Depending on you, this could be a benefit or a detriment. Jury's still out on this one. For me, it's personal. I played this version the most, and I played it during the formative "shut up, I'm gaming" era of my childhood. Young, impressionable, eager to blast away. That's the EVAD that existed when this game entered my household. While the Atari 7800 version is far superior in absolutely every measurable way, better graphics, cleaner controls, amazing two-player modes, phenomenal two-player modes. It's basically the holy grail of home console ports. This little 2600 port feels like home to me, and that counts for something. Other. Porting Asteroids to the Atari 2600 was no small feat. The arcade original was a vector-based game with specialized display and crisp monochrome lines that glowed with mathematical elegance. The VCS, on the other hand, had a different philosophy. What if we just make everything flicker and hope no one notices? Despite the vastly different hardware, the port holds up remarkably well. It trades sleek vectors for a storm of multicolored blobs. But that visual pivot wasn't just for show. It was necessity meets ingenuity. The 2600 can't do vector graphics. Period. So instead of clean lines, you get something that looks like Skittles in a dryer. But it works. And the Rainbow Chaos actually gives this port a unique flavor, even if it's less arcade fidelity and more fruit salad in orbit. The developer also employed bank switching, a technique used to squeeze more out of limited memory by swapping sections of code in and out. It's a bit like trying to run a restaurant kitchen with only one burner, but you keep switching out the pots and pans fast enough that no one notices you are technically under-equipped. Or another way to imagine it. Like a magician with only one hand visible at a time, Asteroids hides its extra 4KB up its sleeve, until it needs to pull out a new trick. Neither the coin-op nor the 2600 versions of Asteroids was meant to let players survive for ages on a single run. But clever players quickly found out ways to break that unspoken rule. In the arcade, techniques like lurking, just above the saucer's predictable firing zone, lets you milk the score counter far beyond what any coin-op developer would have smiled upon. On the 2600, the same spirit applies, even if the tactics differ. You don't need twitch reflexes or ninja-grade rotation, just a willingness to experiment, find the safe zones, and play smarter instead of harder. What started as a frenetic blastathon turns into something more strategic. A battle of angles, positioning, and patience. Especially if you figured out those traitorous screen edges aren't just dangerous, they're avoidable. Let's also address the science, or complete disregard for it. Audible sirens and explosions in the vacuum of the cosmos? Check. Asteroids clustered so tightly they should be gravitationally bound, but aren't? You bet. And your ship mysteriously slows down in open space, violating Newton's first law, unless you assume the existence of a vast, invisible mist of bright dust. It's nonsense. But it's entertaining nonsense. And since we're already being unreasonably pedantic, real asteroid fields and belts, like the one between Mars and Jupiter, they're incredibly sparsely populated. In real life, flying through the asteroid belt would look like empty space, with the occasional potato drifting by in its predictable orbit around the Sun, with a semi-major axis of 2 to 4 AU, which you would also be doing if you were just chilling in the same region. But that's not much of a video game, is it? Lastly, let's appreciate the physical packaging. The box art, manual, and label depict a gloriously dramatic starfighter, battling dense fields of jagged rocks with sparks flying and perspective lines slicing into deep space. It's all very Star Wars adjacent, bold, kinetic, and may be a bit aspirational, given the flickering realities of what appears on screen. Still, you were a kid in the early 80s? That artwork might have been the thing that sealed the deal. You weren't just buying a cartridge, you were signing up to save the galaxy from your living room with a joystick the size of a Rubik's Cube. Me, myself, and sometimes you. Game modes 34 through 66 are the two-player equivalents of 1 through 33. It's classic alternating play, one ship per person, swapping control when somebody explodes. Simple enough. But here's the thing. Asteroids on the 2600 is a game that, once you've hit your groove, you can stay in it for a while. If you're playing with somebody who's particularly good at it, or just better than you, get comfy. You might be waiting a while. On the flip side, it is nice that two-player support exists at all. This was no guarantee back then, and many a game might have benefited from that extra option. That said, there's not much personalization here. The game matrix gives you various combinations of features, speed, score thresholds for extra lives, and the featured special action, hyperspace fields, 180 flip, nothing. But in two-player mode, both players get the same setup. Both players still get it, but they're tethered to the same setup. The only thing you can toggle per person is whether the enemy spacecraft, UFOs and satellites, appear, by flipping those individual difficulty switches. I suppose one could imagine a version where, say, only one player gets hyperspace or earns extra lives every 5,000 points, but that kind of micro-customization just wasn't the vibe in 1981. You took turns, picked a mode, and hoped your little brother would stop asking why all the rocks looked like fruity pebbles. And honestly, Asteroids is at its best as a solo experience. Not just because of the alternating play mechanics, but because the shift between players can be jarring, especially after a long stretch of watching and suddenly realizing, oh, that's me now. It's easy to lose the flow. So sure, two-player mode is a thoughtful inclusion, and it gives the game some shared experience value, but for me, it's a one-player classic. If you're actively gaming with someone and want to tag team space rock destruction with a partner in a more meaningful way, a way that resonates far beyond the outer reaches of our galaxy, I cannot give a better suggestion than the 7800 port. It's not a faithful recreation of the arcade either, but it's got excellent graphics, phenomenal two-player options, and it is hands down the cream of the crop when it comes to home ports of this game. Who would enjoy this? I'm a firm believer that there's fun to be had in any game. Yes, even the ones that make you question your life choices. Fortunately, Asteroids for the 2600 isn't one of those. It delivers magnificently. Now, fans of the arcade original might turn their noses up at this port for lacking the glowing vector flashiness or the twitchy quarter siphoning pace. And sure, it is not a one-to-one clone. But for the rest of us mere mortals, it holds up surprisingly well. Graphically, it's dated, because it's from 1981. What is real, though, is how tight the gameplay feels. And it's not something you could assume back then. Or now, frankly. Just take a leisurely scroll through the Google Play Store, where every third title looks like it was designed by a committee of goldfish and monetized by a casino. Whether you're up for a quick blast or a long contemplative high-score session, where your thumbs go numb, this game has you covered. Some will find it repetitive or boring. Others will find it to be retro gaming comfort food. Low res, flicker, total satisfaction. So, which camp do you fall into? Choose wisely. Your space triangle is counting on you. Legacy. Asteroids will forever be one of the most notable arcade games of all time. That legacy is basically etched into granite. And not the break apart into medium-sized chunks kind. With new cabinets featuring modern games, not exactly rolling out at golden age pace, its place in history seems pretty secure. It's not going to be forgotten. What about the home ports? This version landed right during the peak years of the 2600, and the aftermarket reflects that loud and clear. It's everywhere. You won't need to hunt it down. It'll come to you. Honestly, I advise against buying it intentionally. Just pick up a couple affordable Atari lots and you'll conveniently end up with 2 or 3 copies before you realize it. Do you already have a 2600 collection? Then congratulations, you already own Asteroids. This port will probably survive the next few decades through retro compilations and hardware emulations. But beyond that, hard to say. It's a good game, undeniably so. But time isn't exactly kind to even the most iconic titles. Games just don't stop coming out, and cultural memory is a finite resource. Much like how Westerns ruled the airwaves until they quietly moseyed off into the sunset, there's a real possibility that Asteroids, and the 2600 library in general, could suffer the same slow fade into irrelevance for younger generations. That said, this is a console-defining game. Whether or not anyone's still playing it in 2075, I firmly believe no VCS collection is complete without it. Even if it comes bundled with 3 other games and a half a dust bunny. Overall, it's a fun game. Every mall had its anchor stores, and every console has its anchor titles. And Asteroids is absolutely one of those for the Atari 2600. It's not the flashiest, and it's not the most addictive. It's not even a game I'd call essential for a play session. But for the collection, for the legacy of the console, foundational. The look is colorful and chaotic in all the right ways. The sound, minimal but effective, pulls you in. The gameplay, surprisingly deep once you get the hang of it. And even with its quirks and corners, it holds up better than it probably has any right to. I like this version of Asteroids. A lot. It's my favorite one. Not the best, but my favorite. And I can make that distinction. There's nostalgia at play here, absolutely. But I'm not as tethered to it as I am to some other childhood escapades. If I never play it again, I won't lose sleep over it. It's in my regular rotation now, and I'll definitely revisit it. But it doesn't have to be, and I don't have to. I can live without it. So, it is what it is. But more importantly, it was what it was. And what it was? A little space triangle, flying through a rainbow of rocks, dodging death in pixelated silence. It was a game I grew into, not one I obsessed over. A steady presence. The kind of thing that lives on in the background of a young gamer's life until one day, years later, you realize it was part of your story the whole time. Not every memory needs to be specific. Some of them are just feelings, a sense of time and place. A game that didn't shout for your attention, but was always there when you needed it. For me, Asteroids is one of those. Not a thunderclap, but a heartbeat. And maybe that's enough. Next. The 2600 reviews in 2026 moves forward and turns to its all-purpose contingency plan. You mean Plan B? Yes. B. Thanks for watching, and as always, see you next mission. In the 80s, bowling wasn't just about knocking down pins. It was a full contact birthday party. You wore shoes that smelled like regret, scored games with a stubby pencil you immediately lost, and dodged screaming kids while sprinting for lukewarm pizza or flat pop. Bumpers were either a blessing or a brutal reminder that you still managed to miss with help. And if your turn was 3 kids away, time to drop quarters into Centipede and hope no one noticed you bailed. Bowling on the Atari 2600 doesn't offer any of that. No grease-soaked pizza, no arcade cabinets humming in the corner, just one lonely pixel man flinging a circle at 10 suspiciously square pins. And somehow, it bowls a decent game. Basics. Bowling was published by Atari and released in 1978 for the Atari Video Computer System, later renamed the Atari 2600, once marketing caught up to reality. The game was programmed by Larry Kaplan, an early Atari developer, also responsible for titles like Air Sea Battle, which I reviewed earlier if you want to check it out. Cartridge designed for 1 or 2 players, 2 players alternating, like in real bowling. Bowling for the Atari 2600 offers 6 game variation, because nothing says authentic 80s bowling like a pixelated split decision on how to throw your ball. And yes, I know I keep talking about the 80s bowling, even though this game technically hit shelves in the late 70s. Call it poetic license, or just me stuck in my own nostalgia loop. Overview. For those who have never been bowling before, read the manual, because that's what this is. When it comes to the rules, scoring, and general flow of the sport, bowling on the Atari 2600 gets it all pretty much right. There's no extravagant backstory, no quirky leveling system, no backtracking to find a blue key you missed 3 screens ago. It's bowling on your CRT. Console switches. As an early release for the console, the switches are pretty standard fare. Power turns the game on. TV type toggles between color and palettes friendly for black and white television sets. Difficulty. Each player has their own difficulty switch. B gives you a better shot at knocking down all the pins, while A adds a frustratingly higher chance of splits. Select cycles through the 6 game variations, and finally the reset switch starts the game. Used frequently by perfectionists and people who think 9 spare is a personal failure. My youthful experience. My first time playing bowling for the 2600 wasn't exactly a milestone moment. It was just a few years ago, part of a Let's make sure all the games in this eBay lot actually work. Session. The game functioned. Mission accomplished. But my memories of actual bowling alleys? I've got plenty of those. And probably too many to cram into this one episode. So let's just say we're rolling out a few now, saving a few spares for later titles. Many times in the 80s, it was me, Mom, and whichever friend we invited along. None of us were close in skill, so we didn't compete against each other. We competed against our own personal bests. Birthday parties were more competitive, but if you were stuck in a skill level limbo between the gutterball crowd and the mini prodigies, you just kind of went through the motions. No rival, no drama, just 10 frames of existential loneliness in rental shoes. Then there were the classic alley antics. Teens getting booted for wearing street shoes past the line of no return. Rowdy drinkers in the attached bar, and cigarette smoke curling through the air like it had a league membership. By the 90s, I'd tag along with my dad on league night, not to bowl, but to lurk near the arcade cabinets. There's a Simpsons episode where Bart stands next to a rack of video game cartridges in a store, looking sad, hoping somebody will feel sorry for him and buy one. That was basically my strategy at the arcades. And honestly, it worked more often than you think. Evidently, a quarter was easier to hand over than a whole cartridge. I'd bring a few of my own coins, of course, but once they were gone, I'd post up and watch older kids, bikers with mohawks, and metalheads absolutely destroy whatever machine I declared coolest that week. Later, in the 90s, both Mom and Dad bowled in a league, and I brought a friend to pass the time. We bought pogs from a vending machine and traded them like they were currency backed by gold and playground cred. Remember pogs? They're coming back. In elf form. Is that right? And of course, pizza. League night pizza. Mom and Dad's team always ordered more than they can eat, and me and my friend were more than happy to clean up the leftovers. The look. Visually, it's alright. For the time, the bowler sprite is actually pretty impressive. Limited animation frames, sure, but for late 70s standards, not too shabby at all. The ball is a circle. Good job. Proportions are solid, and that's worth something. The pins, meanwhile, are squares. Totally acceptable for the era, but you're going to need to engage your imagination a bit harder if you want them to feel like actual pins. But hey, that's what we used to do. No virtual reality, no augmented reality, no HDMI, just a handful of vaguely representative blocks, and the human brain doing its best to fill in the blanks. Most sprites don't really animate so much as slide across the screen, like they're on a frictionless, invisible Roomba. The ball doesn't roll, the pins don't fly, but they do move, and movement was half the battle. I didn't notice any sprite flicker, but I also wasn't looking that closely. I think this game predates multiplexing, which, if I recall, didn't show up until games like Home Run. Still, for a game juggling 10 objects on a collision course with another object, it holds up visually better than expected. And now let's talk about something that actually aged rather well, the scorecard. The heads-up display is clean and quite functional. You've got frame-by-frame scoring at the top of the screen, and it displays spares, strikes, and totals with real clarity. For a 1978 console game, that's almost witchcraft. You can actually tell what frame you're on. You can track your score without needing a separate notepad or human referee. For all the sliding and square pins, this part is, dare I say it, elegant. Strikes and spares are celebrated with a brief little burst of colorful flashing. A short one for a spare and a longer one for a strike. It's simple, it's charming, and it's the Atari equivalent of a standing ovation. The lane looks like a lane. The scorecard is complete and, more importantly, readable. For an early VCS release, that's almost a technical miracle. And one minor but curious detail. The bowler is shown in profile, but the pins are clearly viewed from above. It's not distracting and it doesn't hurt gameplay, but perspective consistency much? The Twisted Hallway from Ocarina of Time perhaps owes its inspiration from bowling. Sound. It has the basics you'd expect from early 2600 release. It doesn't overreach, and honestly, it handles its limited audio duties pretty well, all things considered. The ball hurtling down the lane is paired with a rhythmic hum that kind of sort of emulates the sound of a rolling bowling ball. Or maybe the warp core of a starship. Either way, it's got some range. Knocking down the pins results in a rapid-fire pew pew pew, which feels more at home in a space shooter than a bowling alley. Not exactly the iconic crash of real pins, but it gets the point across. I mean, the pins are squares after all. We're clearly not striving for full realism here. As mentioned in the look section, strikes and spares trigger a bit of a screen flashing flare, and they're paired with a little celebratory jingle. It's cheerful enough to let you know you did something good without crossing the line into obnoxiousness. There's no background music, but that's par for the course with early VCS fare. Silence was an effective design choice back then. So, if you were hoping for some REO Speedwagon echoing through the speakers, like they used to crank during the midnight bowling at the local alley, sorry, this one's all business. No can't fight this feeling. Crude by today's standards? Absolutely. But it fits the vibe, contributes to the mood, and never overstays its welcome. Gameplay. It's really quite simple. As far as pick-up-and-play titles go, bowling is a masterpiece. The manual has its charm, and some bonus 1970s graphic design flair, but most players will have no trouble jumping right in without ever cracking it open. You use the joystick to position your player, and then you press the button to slide the circle, or roll the ball, and that's it. That's bowling, baby! There are 6 game variations total, split across 3 core gameplay types. Games 1 and 2, curveball. After you release the ball, you get to nudge it up or down to curve it. Time it poorly, and you'll just watch it drift sadly into the gutter. A little finesse goes a long way here. Games 3 and 4, steerable ball. These allow you to actively steer the ball as it cruises down the lane. It's not exactly realistic, but it's arguably the most interactive and engaging of the modes, especially if you're on a quest for that elusive 300. Games 5 and 6, straight ball. The minimalist option. You line up, press the button, and watch. That's it. Technically the most authentic in terms of bowler input, but let's face it, if you're playing a video game just to watch something happen, you might be due for a nap. The odd-numbered selections are for one player, the even numbers are the two-player alternating versions. And don't forget, those difficulty switches, they can subtly change your odds. If the pins are taunting you with endless splits, it might be time to double-check that you're not playing on A by accident. Whether you're curving, steering, or just pushing and praying, there's something pleasantly tactile about bowling. It's not flashy, but it nails the basics. And when you finally pick up a nasty spare with a perfectly timed curveball, it's weirdly satisfying. This game has a ball return. Not an underground magical tunnel like in real alleys, but you visually do see the ball roll back after each attempt. That detail impresses me. More than it should in 2025, but appropriately so for 1978. I half expected the ball to just poof back into your hand. But nope. It returns like it's supposed to. Authenticity achieved. Until your bowler suddenly teleports to the ball the moment it gets back. It's like they ran out of RAM for walking animations and just said, beam them over. The effect is so abrupt, I wouldn't be surprised if Crow and Tom Servo suddenly popped off to riff on it. Did we miss the part where he channeled his inner Nightcrawler, or are we just rolling with it? Me, myself, and sometimes you. Bowling on the 2600 works just fine solo, and it works just fine with a friend. It's alternating play, sometimes a turnoff, but in this case, turns are short enough that it never feels like you're stuck watching someone else hog the fun. Really, it would have been bizarre not to make it alternating play. It's how bowling works. Whether you're playing alone or with somebody, the gameplay doesn't shift dramatically. But sometimes, the game isn't the variable, it's the company. A forgettable title can turn into a classic if you're playing it with the right person. Conversely, a solid game can feel like a slog if your player 2 is a buzzkill. Bowling is neutral enough to fall into this category. It's like chicken. On its own, it's pretty good. But throw on some spices, and you've got a whole new meal. Not that I'm suggesting you go out and befriend turmeric and onion salt, but barbecue sauce? That's the buddy who sticks around for league night and buys the next round of pizza. Who would enjoy this? Obviously, a game this old and outdated in a genre that has been proved upon immensely over the last 5 decades is difficult to defend. But it holds up fairly well compared to many of its contemporary counterparts. It's easy to pick up and play. It has a few game modes and difficulty switch options to give it a bit of variety. None of them are extremely groundbreaking. The physics are acceptable. Collision detection is good. It's not going to wow you with realistic graphics or physics, but it's effective at conjuring the feel of a classic bowling alley from the late 70s, where the game was straightforward and the company made the fun. I do recommend it for any retro game enthusiasts. If you want realistic visuals, you'll prefer something more modern. But it's alright. And for replayability, until you've rolled the immaculate 300, there's always room for improvement. Time will tell if the grind for perfection is a motivational goal or a quest in futility. Legacy. Bowling for the Atari Video Computer System is not iconic. Its longevity is likely limited. Very good for its time, and still very playable today. It strikes a nostalgic chord, but for a smaller and smaller percentage of the population as time marches on. It fits nicely into retro compilations, sure, but its target demographic is aging. And it won't be too much longer before even Wii Sports Bowling starts replacing it in that department. It holds up well, but its relevance is fading fast. Share it with your kids, or even your grandkids, now. Ingraining good memories in today's youth might be the only way this game lives on. But even then, that's probably just a delay of the inevitable. The youth may not find the game up to new standards, so you need to be the barbecue sauce they need. The bonding can overcome its outdated appearance. It might not quite be an exercise in futility, but bowling's ability to live on solely in the memories of those who played it is a thread it can hang on to for only so long. Overall, it looks alright. It sounds alright. You and I both know it's not going to compete with modern games in either of those categories. The gameplay? Acceptable. Good, even, if you've been blissfully unaware of every advancement in console gaming over the last half-century. The goal is simple. It respects the rules of the sport, and it requires zero prep to insert the cartridge and start having fun. Its replayability is as strong as your drive to improve, and as limited as your ability to bowl a perfect game. It lacks variety. The game variations add a touch of deviation, but none of the mode plus difficulty switch combos change the gameplay in any significant way. And yet, I like it. There's nothing inherently bad about it. Bowling is a sport anyone can enjoy, regardless of skill or experience. And bowling is a game that captures that same spirit. I wouldn't call it a must-have, but it's certainly not something to avoid like the plague. Even in a world where its descendants have fleshed things out far beyond these simple beginnings, it remains fun and surprisingly solid for something this old. Next. The lanes have gone quiet. your shoes are back in the rental counter quarantine zone. Your scorecard mysteriously omits the strike you swear you rolled. Someone's dad is lecturing the teen staff about how real nachos don't come in a plastic tray. And some kid is licking frosting off the ball return. The birthday banner is sagging, and the one this whole party was allegedly for, who cried in frame 2, is now running laps with an 8-pound, scratched up, heavily chipped house ball in hand. The soda's gone warm. The cheese sticks were never hot to begin with. But just when you think it's time to go home and question your life choices, you spot it. Over in the dimly lit corner, something glowing, twitching, crawling. A screen littered with pixelated panic. It's not bowling, but you won't need bumpers to get a score higher than 43. Thanks for watching, and as always, see you next mission. Previously on the A to Z of Atari 2600. The birthday party was winding down. Empty pizza boxes, crumpled paper hats, and that one kid who took a spitball to the face and still wouldn't stop crying. The parents were eyeing the exits, and the employees had long since given up on pretending to care. That's when I saw it, in the corner of the bowling alley, past the claw machine full of lies and the soda machine that only dispensed foam. Centipede, trackball and all. It was glowing like a beacon for kids who'd already spent their quarters, but were willing to fish for spares in the return tray. I dropped a quarter in without hesitation. Bowling was over. Now I was in a different kind of game. The bugs kept coming, and while I was busy mowing down centipedes and spiders, I had a sneaking suspicion there were some critters lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to dig in. Background viewing. Blah, 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 blah. Link in the description. Okay, yeah, so by now it's obvious that I record this voiceover before I look for related content, so check out the description below. I'm sure the creator I chose to highlight for this episode is good. The basics. Title, Centipede. Platform, the Atari 2600. Release date, December 1982 in the US. October 83 Japan, and 1988 in the UK. These dates may need to be researched for validation, but that's the best I could find on short notice. Developed by General Computer Corporation. Fun fact, GCC also developed the 2600 port of Ms. Pac-Man, a lot of the Atari 5200 games, and the hardware and much of the software for the Atari 7800. So for a considerable period, it's often joked that GCC did Atari better than Atari. Published by Atari Inc., programmed by, as best I could tell, Doug McRae and Josh Littlefield. 4 kilobytes of ROM. We have us a single-screen vertical shooter with one player. There is no alternating or simultaneous two-player modes. Controller. Your trusty 2600 joystick. And compatibles. Speaking of compatibles, it is compatible with the Atari 2600 trackball, but it reads the inputs digitally, so there is no trackball mode support here. Overview. Arcade Origins. Created by Ed Logg and Donna Bailey. This port was not authored by the original team, but let's see how it fares. You're deep in the enchanted forest. Armed with your magic wand, you must shoot your mystical enemies. Spiders, scorpions, fleas, and the dreaded centipede as they advance relentlessly. You are humanity's only hope. Sounds like a lot of pressure for a little pixel. Centipede for the Atari 2600 is a blastathon, a vertical shooter that pits you against all the evils of the garden. The primary threat and namesake of the game is the centipede itself, snaking its way down the screen in all of its segmented and intimidating glory. But it doesn't come alone. Spiders, fleas, scorpions join the fray, and this simple concept quickly turns into a full-on frenzy before you can even stop to catch your breath. Console switches. Power turns the game on. TV type. The manual I have clearly states you can toggle this for color and black and white sets, yet neither cartridge I own changes the palette at all. It's these little things that are going to lead to a continent-wide, industry-crashing meltdown someday. The little things. They add up. Just ask Gavin Rosdale. The left and right difficulty switches, the manual, now under high scrutiny, claims the difficulty switches are not used in this game. So far as I can tell, they got this one right. Mark your calendars. Select cycles between the standard game mode and the easy mode, denoted by that adorable teddy bear face we've seen plenty of in my 2600 reviews. You'll survive longer, but at what cost? Reset starts the game. My youthful experience. Well, I had a handful of encounters with Centipede in arcades, and many hours with the 7800 port. The 2600 version wasn't one I had access to until just a few years back. I would imagine that a young EVAD would have enjoyed this one a lot, assuming he didn't already dig into the 7800 version first. The easier teddy bear setting probably would have been my jam back then. Honestly, still kind of comforting now. No shame in surviving longer. Now, if I'd owned both versions side by side, not gonna lie, this one would have seen significantly less action. Not because it's bad, but because the more complete experience was sitting one cartridge slot away. The look. For an Atari 2600 title, Centipede makes a strong visual impression right from the jump. The colorful, animated title screen isn't something most 2600 games bothered with. Plenty just dropped you straight into the gameplay screen or showed a still image and called it a day. So right away, this one feels like it's putting in a little extra effort. In-game, the visuals simple, distinct. Your ship is a tall rectangle that looks like the hero from Adventure got stretched vertically. Hand him a bug zapper and we've got an intense crossover in the making. Mushrooms are rendered as bright, blocky dashes, and while they don't change appearance to reflect damage, which is a quality of life I do prefer, they're bold and easy to spot. The enemies are a mixed bag. Spiders look surprisingly good, aggressive, 2 frames of animation as far as I can tell, but very easy to identify. The fleas are serviceable, and the scorpions, they look like ghosts to me. But that's not unique to this version. They had the same identity crisis in the 7800 port. The HUD is clean and well executed. Your remaining lives are tracked with copies of that same adventure protagonist sprite, stacked neatly in the lower left. Score sits in the lower right in a bright, readable font that stands out against the background. And when the game ends, your score does this satisfying rapid color flash, like a last gasp of arcade flair before you're booted back to the title screen. But it returns while the game is showing off demo mode. Visually, this game is stunning. The colors are vivid and inviting, and the flashing poison mushrooms look especially cool mid-chaos. There is a little bit of sprite flicker when multiple enemies appear on the same horizontal line, but it does a good job to display each sprite on alternating frames, so they don't disappear per se, they just look lighter, partially see-through. And if you're not looking for it, and you've played games that do this in the past, it's a non-issue. It doesn't push the system quite as hard as some later 2600 titles like Solaris, Midnight Magic, but it's a clear step up from the launch era stuff. A product of its time? Sure, but one that knew how to play to the hardware's strengths without overreaching. Sound. The audio in Centipede for the 2600 is surprisingly great. It doesn't try to copy the arcade sound effects note for note because that would be hilarious given the hardware. But it captures the vibe shockingly well. That tense, jittery energy. is fully intact. The constant stream of shots has a satisfying pop. The centipede segments explode with a snappy chirp, and the spiders make these unsettling little high-pitched crawl sounds that are somehow exactly what you'd want a pixelated spider to sound like. It all blends into this rhythmic, escalating chaos that keeps your nerves tight and your trigger finger twitching. There's no music. Obviously, this is the 2600, not a concert hall. But what's here gets the job done. And then some. It's the kind of sound design that feels like it's not just filling space, but actually reinforcing the gameplay loop. Honestly, if somebody had told me the 2600 could pull this off before I had played it, I would have laughed, pointed at combat, and then handed them a shovel. Gameplay. Centipede on the 2600 holds up surprisingly well. The core loop is all here. Move, shoot, survive. You've got your trusty Pixel Blaster, Mr. Adventure, planted at the bottom of the screen in a steady parade of multi-legged death slithering down towards you. It's you versus the garden. And the garden is pissed. Movement is snappy, but not surgical. You can zip around the bottom quarter of the screen just fine, but coming to a precise stop is difficult. It's possible to get under a flea and blast it before it slams into you, but it ain't elegant. The centipede segments zigzag towards you, bouncing off mushrooms and splitting apart when shot. It's your job to thin the herd before one of them reaches your face. Spiders leap in and out of your space like caffeinated Roombas. Fleas drop straight down, adding new mushrooms as they go, just in case you weren't having enough fun already. And the scorpions? They're just here to poison some mushrooms for the lulz. The enemy mix keeps things frantic, forcing you to prioritize targets on the fly, especially in later waves, when chaos is less of a possibility and more of a promise. One major plus, you can just hold the fire button down to rapid fire. It's a bit slower than ideal, but still a welcome convenience, especially for a game that doesn't exactly encourage taking your sweet time. And while the joystick gets the job done, Centipede was clearly born for a trackball. The 2600 is technically capable of supporting true trackball input, but no official games were ever released that enabled trackball mode. So if you feel you need to use the 2600 trackball, set it to joystick mode, and you can enjoy sending digital inputs to the console with a spherical interface. It works, but it's about as graceful as steering shopping carts with ski poles. Still, despite the minor clumsiness, the game nails the arcade tension. The bugs don't just invade your space, they set up camp, build condos, and invite their weird friends over. The difficulty ramps up fast, and it's not long before you're swatting at everything, just hoping your thumb doesn't fall off. I'm not sure if this mini-comic originally came packaged with Centipede, but I have it. And let's be real, bundling it with something else would have made far less sense. It is a legit DC-published tie-in, complete with 1983 copyright and some surprisingly stylish artwork. Does it have a compelling story? Maybe. Will I ever find out? Also maybe. It's sitting on my shelf like a polite but insistent invitation to create a special episode someday. Probably after I've exhausted every obscure game in the alphabet and need to start reviewing literature. I just can't wait to analyze the emotional arc of a mushroom. Me, myself, and sometimes you. Centipede for the 2600 has no two-player option, so you're stuck taking turns, waiting patiently for the other person to finally lose, and if they're good at it, you might want to pack a lunch. Sure, you could hand the controller off between waves instead. That sounds like a reasonable workaround, until you realize it plays out like a desperate gym teacher trying to make sure all 20 kids get at least one at-bat in a 4-inning game. It's rushed, awkward, and not exactly what you'd call cooperative play. As a one-player game, though, it shines just fine. It's fast, fun, and frantic. And honestly, I'm okay flying solo on this one. Because if it did have a two-player mode, I'd be forced to compare it to the glorious chaos of the 7800 version. And this one is just not up for that fight. Still, it would have been nice to have some option for a second player, especially back in the day, before the 7800 was even a concept. Who would like this? If you grew up with this cart, odds are the sound effects are permanently etched into your brain. Right next to your home phone number and the jingle from that Mr. T cereal commercial that aired constantly.
Teaming up with Mr. T cereal, it's getting on the team that knows how cool breakfast can be. You get a crispy corn taste with a touch of brown sugar. Teaming up with Mr. T, it's cool.
You'll probably enjoy it for what it is, a faithful, if stripped down, version of an arcade classic. If you're just now discovering it, Centipede is a time capsule, an early 80s attempt to shrink a trackball-powered cabinet into something that could run on a machine better known for blocky cowboys and haunted rectangles. And in that sense, it's a charming little bug hunt worth revisiting. I see it as a game for folks who enjoy precision shooting, screen management, and bug-related anxiety. People who like to dig in for the long haul. That's the 5th foreshadowing hint. Calm down, Evad. Legacy. Centipede is an all-time classic. It gobbled up quarters from people of all ages, genders, and cultural backgrounds. One of the first arcade games to completely ignore who you were, as long as your coins were round. While the golden age of arcades is long gone, the name Centipede still rings a bell for a lot of people. The 2600 port? Also pretty well remembered. And very well stocked. So well stocked, in fact, that I have to wonder if a few warehouses tipped over unopened crates in the mid-2000s. There were so many copies on the secondary market, loose, CIB, even factory sealed, that its scarcity is definitely not the selling point here. And yet, judging by some of the inflated asking prices, sellers must be under the impression that they're listing family heirlooms. As of recording, many of these prices seem hilariously detached from reality. Still, it's a solid port, and it's made its way into countless Atari compilations over the years. Will it survive? Hard to say. It was born in an era where vertical shooters were everywhere. And let's face it, they're not all going to get museums named after them. But this one has a better shot than most. Its legacy is not etched in stone, or even 16 stone for that matter. But someday, it may be. Overall, Centipede on the 2600 is one of those rare ports that manages to feel both stripped down and completely sincere. It's not arcade perfect. Far from it. It's a far cry from that booming cabinet with its glowing trackball and hypnotic soundscape. But what it is honest. And honestly fun. It captures something essential. The intensity, the rhythm, the strange jittery poetry of surviving just a few seconds longer than last time. For those who played this version back in the day, booting it up now is like finding an old birthday card tucked inside a shoebox, creased at the edges. Maybe missing a few words, but filled with feeling. It's the kind of game that reminds you what it felt like to be a kid with time to burn, an imagination in overdrive, and no idea how many hours you were about to lose to those spiders and segmented pests. And for those who never had it back then, it's still worth a look. Not as a technical marvel, but as a time capsule. A charming, twitchy little window into an era where fun didn't need to be flashy. Next. D is for... Come on, you don't need a hint. I've been dropping them like rocks all episode. Thanks for watching, and as always, see you next mission. 2026 has brought us a great A to Z lineup for the 2600 so far. We piloted a space triangle to zap asteroids, went bowling for a classic 80s style birthday party, and while lingering afterward at the alley, we tried our best pest control efforts with Centipede. In the process, we've learned that some games dig deep. Now we will find out that others pump dragons full of air until they explode. In the arcades, Dig Dug was an instant classic, colorful, chaotic, and oddly cathartic. On the 2600, it's smaller, clunkier, and a bit blocky, but it still manages to carry some of that charm, complete with recognizable sound cues and a surprising amount of original gameplay. Let's tunnel in. Related viewing. Downstairs. In the description. You know the drill. Check it out. Basics. Dig Dug for the Atari 2600 was released in 1983 and published by Atari during that magical period when no one quite realized, okay, some people did, that the video game industry was circling the drain. It's a single-player action game based on Namco's 1982 arcade smash hit. This 2600 port was developed by General Computer Corporation with Doug McRae as lead programmer. GCC had a solid track record of arcade to console conversions at the time, including Ms. Pac-Man, Pole Position, and most recently for us, Centipede, which we just tackled previous episode. The cartridge weighs in at 4K, pushing the 2600's modest hardware in some clever ways. You'll need a standard joystick controller to dig, dodge, and inflate your subterranean foes. Compatible controllers like a Sega Genesis pad work just fine too. Just don't plug in a paddle or a keyboard controller or driving controller. Well, unless you enjoy disappointment. Overview. Dig Dug on the Atari 2600 is a simplified but surprisingly functional take on the arcade original. It is a single-screen maze game. I don't entirely agree with that label. I mean, sure, you dig your own path, so technically it becomes a maze, but it's not the dot-collecting, route-memorizing kind of maze game that usually defined the genre in that era. I'll go with it, but reluctantly. There's no need to drag this tangent out any further. Like the arcade, you still dig through dirt, pop enemies with your trusty air pump, and try to survive as the playfield becomes increasingly chaotic. It captures the basic premise and pace of the arcade game, even if some of its flashier elements are left buried. The dirt is divided into 4 distinct colored layers, a clever visual choice that actually helps reinforce the scoring strategy, which we will get into later. The palette stays the same for several rounds at a time, but eventually shifts every handful of levels. One of these swaps even trades the earthy tones for a soft pastel set that, while not exactly rugged, manages to evoke the thrill of excavation through peach sorbet. It looked cool to me as a kid. Still, kinda does. There are 2 modes of play, a standard game and a simplified kids mode, denoted by the now familiar teddy bear icon we've seen in other late 2600 titles. That mode consists of a single static level with 1 Puka and 1 Fygar, who seem disinterested in doing anything threatening, or really anything at all. They won't even phase through the walls. The stage loops endlessly, so you can technically play forever, assuming there isn't a kill screen buried somewhere in the code, which I am not motivated enough to go hunting for. It's more sandbox than challenge, and exists purely for experimenting with mechanics in a no-pressure environment. Nice in theory, but easy mode here is fall asleep holding the joystick easy. Still, the main game moves quickly and remains accessible. It's not the most feature-rich version of Dig Dug, but for a 4K cartridge on aging hardware, it delivers a decent underground romp, especially if you approach it for what it is, a compact, cartridge-sized cousin of the real thing. Console switches. Power, you know what this does. If not, I've got my concerns. TV type. Just like Centipede, the manual says to switch to color for color televisions and black and white for black and white sets. But just like Centipede, it appears to be non-functional. There's no black and white mode here. Your pastel excavation remains in full color. Select toggles between the standard game and the so-called kids mode on the title screen. Reset starts the game, although pressing the controller's fire button does the same thing if you're already on the title screen. Efficiency. And here's a quality of life that is just unheard of in the era, and just absolutely amazing. After you lose all your lives, and the game over occurs, you return to the title screen. You can quickly tap the fire button and continue from the level you left off at. Your score resets to 0, but you can play the later levels without having to redo the early ones. This is such an unheard of thing from the era, and moving forward, I think the unlimited continues thing was a good idea. It took a long time to catch on, but a good idea. The left and right difficulty switches, just aesthetic components to the Dig Dug 2600 experience. Purely cosmetic switches with no gameplay impact. My youthful experience. I remember watching the arcade Dig Dug in action when I was really young. Just fascinated by the colorful chaos of it all. It was one of those games that felt like a tiny spectacle, with the air-pumping antics and all those crazy little monsters. Fast forward a bit, and I got my hands on the 7800 port. Quite some time before this version. The 7800 Dig Dug quickly became a favorite, with its smooth gameplay and great graphics. But this Atari 2600 port? Well, I did still have it in my youth. And it wasn't exactly the same, but to young me, it felt pretty much identical aside from the blockier visuals. Only much later did I notice some of the minor but interesting differences that set them apart. I had fun with the 2600 Dig Dug, but it was never the main event. It was more of a let's mix things up novelty, something to pull out when I wanted a change of pace, especially since the 7800 version was always just a few feet away. The look. First off, the dedicated animated title screen gets major props. Always nice when a 2600 game bothers to make some effort there. As for the game itself, well, it looks like Dig Dug, if you squint and ignore the massive scale reduction. Visually, it hasn't exactly aged gracefully, but keep in mind the limitations of the 2600 hardware, which we routinely do in these reviews. It's alright. Our hero is a nicely designed little sprite with a handful of frames of animation. His trusty pump attachment, however, doesn't get such love. I was hoping to see those classic wavy attack pulses as they spread out, but no such luck. Puka looks like a Q*bert knockoff, and I know I'm not the first to say this. Other reviewers and content creators have pointed this out, several actually. I'm not sure if they're copying each other or all independently came to this conclusion themselves, but it's a valid comparison because I agree. Despite looking like a Q*bert knockoff, Puka is serviceable enough. While Fygar is dumbed down, resembling more of a bullfrog than a fire-breathing dragon, he's done well enough as well. The spirit of the arcade originals is captured about as well as the VCS could manage, and the bad guys animate acceptably for the console. The dirt itself, though, not so great. Those black horizontal bars slicing through the screen make it harder to appreciate the visuals, even if they do help indicate your vertical positioning. Once you tune out that glaring distraction, the dirt colors actually do a decent job of mimicking the arcade's palette, albeit with far less detail. It's beyond serviceable, but far from stunning. Rocks are just squares of dirt outlined in black. Simple, yeah, but not winning any beauty contests. On the bright side, the bonus items that appear in the center of the map look mostly good. Some are hits and some are misses, but most are recognizable enough to pass muster. The sound. That lovely animated title screen, accompanied by total silence. It's tolerable, and honestly, considering how many 2600 games treat us to off-key ear punishment, maybe it's for the best. Still, I can't help but wonder how amazing that opening could have been if someone poured their heart and soul into crafting a genuine TIA-based theme song. A missed opportunity? Perhaps. But once you're in the game, it's surprisingly great. The iconic Dig Dug startup jingle plays as your little hero marches into place. And it's shockingly faithful to the arcade. Even the signature digging song, which plays while you're in motion, makes a valiant attempt to echo the original. It's not perfect, but it's definitely recognizable and charming in that Tia Chip kind of way. You'll also get an irritating little nudge if you stand still too long. An audio cue that basically screams, "Get moving, buddy." The pumping sound effects when inflating enemies are solid, and the falling rock crash, stage clear tune, and death jingle all land with satisfying accuracy. This might not be Mountain King or Pitfall 2 territory. Those had audio enhancement chips working overtime. But within the stock limitations of the 2600, this is nearly a masterclass in sound design. Color me impressed. Gameplay. It plays good and it feels good. Dig Dug on the 2600 is one of those rare arcade ports where you don't have to make a huge mental disclaimer like, well, for the Atari, it's playable. No, this one actually feels satisfying to play. The digging is smooth, the controls are tight, and the whole thing hums along with a kind of scrappy confidence. The enemy AI is a delightful mix of chaos and cruelty. Sometimes the Pukas and Vigors wander aimlessly, like they forgot why they came in the room. Other times, they beeline straight for you like a debt collector. And just when you think you've juked them, bam, they go full Danny Phantom and phase through the dirt like spectral assassins. It's a solid blend of unpredictability and panic, which keeps you locked in from start to finish. Difficulty ramps up at a respectable pace. Before you know it, you max out with 7 enemies on screen, indistinguishable from a swarm of doom out to get you. The game turns into a real-time stress test. Spawning a bonus item, it's not random, though it may feel that way at first, and I'll reveal the secret a little bit later. Work with me here on imagining that it's not common knowledge. I have the inside scoop on this classic title. They will appear in the center as a juicy reward, if you can survive long enough to reach it without being steamrolled by a schnozzless Cubert. It's a satisfying little risk-reward moment, and knowing when to go for the prize versus not dying separates the learners from the experts. The objective is to clear all the enemies, but you can leave just one. When it's down to just you and a lone Puka or Figar, the game gives you a quick musical heads up, and your final foe hightails it to the surface, presumably to write a strongly worded letter to the pixelated Geneva Convention. Whether you catch them or let them escape, you move on to the next round. The gameplay loop is tight, addictive, and built for high score chasers. There's always that urge to go just one stage further, or bump your score a few digits higher. It's deceptively deep, shockingly fun, and one of the 2600's better examples of how to strip an arcade classic down to its bones without losing the beating heart underneath. Other. For a game that revolves around cartoon murder with a bike pump, Dig Dug's scoring system is weirdly meticulous. I'll give you some visuals to get the idea here, because I'm not going to explain it in depth. Everything's worth something, though. Flattening foes with rocks, puffing them into pixelated balloon animals, or even hoovering up whatever produce erupts from the earth, like you're grocery shopping in a war zone. Each bonus item has its own nutritional value, which in this case means point totals that somehow reflect a food hierarchy only Namco understands. Carrots and cucumbers are fine, but pineapples? Culinary royalty. Drop 2 rocks in a stage and you'll spawn one of these treats at the center of the screen. But only if there are fewer than 7 enemies left. Why? Presumably sprite limitations. But if you are holding an electrical engineering degree, or just love explaining things in the comment section, have at it. That's called engagement. Speaking of dietary surprises, one of those bonus items is the Galaxian flagship. Just lying there, in the dirt, ready to be walked over and digested like a root vegetable. Look, in 1983, we still had the basic 4 food groups: fruits, vegetables, questionable meat products, and intergalactic warships. It's canon. Don't fight it. Not sure how active the Dig Dug 2600 leaderboard is in 2026, but hey, dream big. As far as inflation is concerned, the cost of wheat and corn have impacted more households than... Oh, wait. The Dig Dug kind. Holding the fire button gets the job done steadily, but tapping it? Way faster. That precious half second can be the difference between life and becoming a Figar barbecue. Or as the Frogurt guy from The Simpsons calls it, Figarbecue. This rapid tap technique isn't unique to the 2600. It's present in the arcade and also the 7800 version. But it still works wonders here. And while this version doesn't require the synchronized button mashing and directional flicks like its more sophisticated siblings, it doesn't punish you for skipping the finger aerobics either. Efficiency wins. Now, here's where it gets weird. Your pump can, ever so delicately, poke through the walls. It's a subtle but noticeable quirk, and an invaluable tool in your arsenal. The 7800 port does this too. Whether it's some hidden genius move, a ghost in the machine, or Atari's secret handshake, we may never unravel the mystery. But hey, it's part of the package. Also, brace yourself for one of the most important phrases in tile-based video game history. Get gridded. NES Zelda fans know this pain. Movement in Dig Dug is tied to a grid system, but you can stop halfway through a tile. If you try to turn while on a half tile, the game forces you to move straight ahead first, executing the turn once you've advanced to the next full tile. This often leads to unexpected collisions with enemies and can feel jarring at first. But with practice, you can buffer your turn input just right to corner with speed and precision, turning this quirk into a powerful tactic. Me, myself, and sometimes you. If you're looking to dig solo, Dig Dug delivers a rewarding single-player experience that balances frantic action with just enough strategy. While there's no two-player mode here, a shame for fans of score-trading couch competitions, the game still manages to stay fresh thanks to its gradually escalating challenge and deceptively deep mechanics. The 7800 port does include a two-player mode, alternating of course. We'll have to review that one soon. It's the obvious format for this type of game, and while it may be the bare minimum, it's still something. The 2600 version? Nope. No two-player action at all. Okay, so that's the real bare minimum. If you want to enjoy it with a friend, you'll be relying on the old school hand off the controller after 5 minutes rule your parents enforced at childhood sleepovers. Legacy. While this port of Dig Dug isn't the definitive way to play the game, it is a fascinating time capsule. It represents both how far the arcade experience had to be scaled back to fit in this world, and how much of the core gameplay could still survive that compression. You get the loop, you get the sound, you even get some semblance of charm, assuming you're not hung up on the black striped dirt. While nothing compares to the arcade cabinet, or even a few rounds on MAME in this modern era of retro gaming, this port holds its own in a cute kind of way. My heart is with the 7800 version, but this little digger is still likely to bring a smile to the faces of those who only had this version to inflate their pukas. Today, the 2600 version is mostly a novelty, especially for players familiar with its more robust siblings. But it earns its place in the library with solid mechanics, memorable sound design, and just enough of that arcade flavor to pass the sniff test. If nothing else, it's a reminder of how hard 1983 tried to bring the arcade home, and how sometimes it moderately worked. For players revisiting the 2600 library alphabetically, it is a great D. And it's one of the better arcade ports on the system, all things considered. Overall, it's Dig Dug, stripped down, flattened out, and jammed into the confines of a wood-paneled VCS. The arcade classic has been through a bit of a pixel blender, sure, but you can still tell what it's supposed to be. The rocks are sort of rock-like. The hero resembles a person, and the enemies, well, you have a red eyeball and hiking boots and a fire-breathing toad. They nailed it. There's no two-player mode, no animated pump cord, no dazzling title screen to lure you in. And yet, it plays well. The controls respond nicely once you get the feel for the tile-based quirks, and the challenge ramps up at a satisfying pace. It has a sound design that punches well above the weight class for the system. It's tense, it's chaotic, and it somehow captures that ever-important feel of Dig Dug. No, it won't replace the arcade version. Nothing will. And the 7800 port remains my personal gold standard. But this version, it still matters. Because for some of us, this was the version we had. This was the one we played on a drab brown or faded olive green carpet in living rooms that smelled like popcorn and ozone. This was Dig Dug at home, before we knew what it could look like. And for all its limitations, it still made us smile. It still gave us that rush of dropping a rock at just the right moment, or inflating a Figar until he popped with a satisfying bloop. This little cartridge might not be the biggest or boldest way to dig, but it sure digs deep into the heart. Next. 2026 has been a trip so far. We blew up asteroids in a space triangle, bowled a few frames at a classic 80s birthday party, and tried our best to exterminate the centimede problem lurking near the snack bar. Then we wandered over to the Dig Dug cabinet for some light excavation and monster inflation. But it's getting late. The party's over. Time to head home. Just one problem. This drive might be the real challenge. A long, cold, foggy test of endurance. Thanks for watching, and as always, see you next mission. "2026 has been an intriguing year. Mastering physics with a space triangle, experiencing an 80s birthday party with bumper lanes and arcade cabinets. But it's time to head home for a little bit. Just one short commute that lasts for many days. E is for Enduro, an aptly named racing game in our current installment of the A to Z of 2600 titles in the year ending 26. Background viewing. Be sure to check out, insert channel name here, and their coverage of this title. Basics. Enduro is released for the Atari 2600, February 1983, published by Activision. Programmed by Larry Miller, it's a behind-the-driver point-of-view racing game. For one player, there's no alternating or simultaneous two-player modes, and you will play this with your 2600 joystick or any compatible. Overview. Strap on your goggles, sink into your seat, and leave all your fears in the pit. You're about to enter the race of your life. You'll be required to pass lots of cars each day. Through sun and snow, fog and ice, sunrise to sunset. As fast as you can. Welcome to the National Enduro! What's the matter, McFly? Yella? Console switches. Power turns the game on. TV type is not used. Difficulty left and right are not used. Select is, we got a theme going here, not used. And reset initiates the game. But it won't start until you actually push the button. My youthful experience. None. I grew up with the 7800 port of Pole Position 2. If I did have Enduro back then, it may have given it a run for its money in time played. It doesn't hold up graphically, but that comparison is so unfair. The mere mention of it makes me want to take a shower. Young Evad likely would have really enjoyed this game if he wasn't too acclimated to Pole Position 2. It plays and handles differently from nearly all racing games, but it has dynamic scenery changes, incredible goals, and that special something that makes you want to play one more time and last just a little bit longer. The look. Enduro keeps things visually simple. The road is just two vertical bands. The side terrain is minimal, and the cars are basic. But the magic happens in the passage of time. Daylight sections are clean. Pretty average by Activision standards, but that says more about Activision than the game. Their reputation was so strong that average for them was often top tier for the console. As each in-game day progresses, the visuals shift dramatically. You suddenly find yourself in a whiteout, snowstorm, a striking, stark screen that immediately tells you that this isn't your run-of-the-mill racer. Then comes dusk, followed by night, where Enduro pulls off a fantastic trick. The other vehicles are represented only by their red taillights. It's minimalist, but completely effective. Then comes fog. Your visibility is cut by about half, creating a distinct visual tone. And finally, sunrise. The transitions may not seem completely seamless, especially by modern standards, but for the 2600, the effect is impressive. Your car has a slightly odd shape. Some have said it resembles a spider, and honestly, I can kinda see it, but let's be real. It's a white car with good treads, and that's what matters. Opponent cars, when not reduced to a pair of taillights, appear as single-color sprites that come in a variety of hues. Pink, orange, blue, yellow, green, another shade of blue, magenta, another shade of blue. Okay, you get the idea. There's not much in the way of sprite animation, but in classic Activision fashion, there is zero flicker. Clean, smooth, and stylish in its own way. Sound. Enduro is not a symphony. It actually holds back quite a bit in the audio department. The familiar engine hum is standard fare for the 2600 racing games. If you've played any number of other racers for the system, you've heard something similar to it before. And so have I. It does intensify as you accelerate. It's nothing revolutionary, and numerous later racing games throughout all of history have emulated this effect, so yeah, it works. It works well enough to be copied. For several decades. And then there are the touches that elevate things. The muffled sound while driving through the snow is a standout detail, subtle but genuinely effective. It doesn't get mentioned enough. Crashes deliver a satisfying crunch, a sound the TIA chip is surprisingly good at, and one that never seems to get old. Competitor cars emit a soft hum, and maybe it's my imagination, but there's almost a hint of Doppler effect as you pass them. Whatever's going on there, it is subtle, but it's nicely done. And that's most of your soundscape. After the fog clears and the sun begins to rise, if you have not yet passed the prerequisite number of cars for the day, a rhythmic beeping alarm lets you know that that clock is ticking. Meet your goal in time and you get a short victory jingle. It's not particularly catchy, but it does the job. but fail to meet the quota, and your engine lets out a slow, deflating whine. It's a whoopee cushion of shame. Not cruel, just disappointed. It's like the game is gently saying, "Really? That was all you had?" Not to be a jerk, just to nudge you toward doing better next time. Gameplay. Enduro begins on day 1. Because that's how we counted in the 80s. Starting with 1. Your goal, pass 200 cars. Not win a race, not even to place. Just pass a small village's worth of fellow motorists who apparently have nowhere better to be. You'll see your car's remaining count tick down in the HUD, along with your trusty odometer, aka your long-term relationship status with asphalt. Controls pretend to be familiar right until they betray you. The button makes you accelerate, which is normal, but releasing it does not slow you down. You just keep cruising like you flipped on the world's most suspicious cruise control. Want a brake? Pull down on the joystick. It's a weird setup at first, but once it clicks, it's kind of cool. Steering is straightforward. The other drivers on the road aren't evil at all. They don't aim for you, but they're not doing you any favors either. They stay in their lanes, for the most part, forcing you to find the gaps and make your move. Nobody's actively trying to get hit and cash out on the insurance. They just kind of exist as mobile traffic cones with a destination. Then comes the snow. The game doesn't go full slapstick with its ice physics. You won't spin out like a sitcom character on roller skates, but your ability to turn slows down just enough to say, "You sure you want to pass that guy right now?" It's more subtle suggestion than punishment. After that, it's dusk, sunset, midnight, fog, dawn, sunrise, repeat. It's a 24-hour loop of danger, all powered by Activision time, which, based on my estimates, runs at a rate that you wish it ran at during your day job. Once you complete day 1, the challenge spikes to 300 cars per day. Yeah, 300! That sounds insane if you're used to normal racing games, but here, well, let's just say, once you're in that zone, you'll be darting between bumpers like a caffeinated frog on a 6-lane highway. Just keep your cool. This isn't all about speed. It's about survival. Like a long-haul trucker with something to prove. In fact, in a roundabout sort of way, this reminds me of modern trucker games. You don't back into docks or unpack pallets, but it has that long-term, on the road again feel to it. Turn the page. Crashing doesn't end the game, but it does end your groove. Your best bet is to slow down, get back in rhythm, and try not to panic. But let's be honest, you'll panic. You'll gun it. You'll hit another car and panic even harder. Rinse, repeat, game over. It's a vicious cycle, but it builds character. You can't drive outside of the road boundaries, and if you collide with them, you lose some speed. This is still a better option than all-out crashing into a vehicle. So if you're in a pinch and for whatever reason it doesn't occur to you to brake, reposition, and then pass, hugging the curb is, although not ideal, not the worst option. Other. When you complete day 5, the little car icon in the HUD turns into a trophy. That's good. But the trophy icon is cursed. That's bad. But if you send a Polaroid of it to Activision, they'll mail you a real cloth patch. That's good. The patch contains potassium benzoate. That's bad. Can I go now? On December 18th, 2021, I actually pulled this off. No, I didn't mail my score to Activision to claim a 40-year-old patch and sew it onto my jean jacket of the same era, but I did document the feat, and it's saved on my Twitch highlights page. If it's in the description, that means I put it there. If it's not, it means I forgot. How's that for preparing ahead? You know, recording the audio before you do all the other stuff is, why do I ramble? Just stick to the script, Evad. Activision ran a lot of these patch challenges back in the day, and honestly, it was genius. Gave kids a reason to play longer and get free advertising stitched to their sleeves. Brilliant. Some of the challenges are comically easy, like turn on the game without crying, but others feel like you're training for some sort of pixelated Olympics. Enduro's challenge falls somewhere in the middle. It's a respectable goal, just hard enough to feel legit, but not so punishing that you'll be screaming into your joystick. And if you stick with it long enough to earn that trophy icon, odds are you'll come out on the other side with a solid appreciation for the game. Or, at the very least, safer driving habits in the snow, which will lower insurance rates for everyone. Me, myself, and sometimes you. Enduro is for one lone, solitary player, and honestly, that makes sense. Imagine telling one person, drive forever, then turning to another and saying, wait here, your turn starts when he collapses. That is not exactly the height of two-player design. Could it have worked with simultaneous play? Yeah, maybe. Activision could have attempted a dragster-style split screen, but that could have made the visibility rough even before you hit the fog. Or a split screen like Street Racer, but then you sacrifice the side-to-side weaving that makes the game so fun. Either way, the Atari 2600 wasn't exactly built for smooth dual-motor endurance tests. In today's 16:9 widescreen world, you know what? You know what? You know what? Maybe Enduro is due for a modern remake. Two-player online endurance mode. Think about it. A full dynamic weather system. A real-time emotional breakdown meter? But as it stands, Enduro for the 2600 is strictly a solo mission. And that's fine. It's a strong one-player game that knows exactly what it is. If your friend wants to play too, tell them to bring a stopwatch and a lot of snacks. Who would like this? If you're into pole position or other behind-the-driver racing games, you owe it to yourself to give Enduro a test drive. That said, your instincts might betray you. The overlap in skills might lull you into false confidence. But Enduro plays by its own rules. You'll need to retrain your reflexes, recalibrate your throttle thumb, and learn when to play it cool and when to punch it like you've just been challenged to drag race by your inner child. The process of mastering the risk-reward balance, knowing when to ease off or floor it, gives the game a learning curve that's genuinely engaging. Progress feels earned, and improvement is addictive. If you like this genre, you'll probably find Enduro both rewarding and weirdly meditative. Well, after a few early crashes and a bruised ego or two. If you're not a fan of this style of racer, though, Enduro probably isn't going to be the game that converts you. It's clever and atmospheric for its time, but ultimately, it's still one car, one road, and a whole lot of dodging. You might be pleasantly surprised, but this one's really geared towards racing fans. Legacy. Look, the nostalgic crowd is always going to defend whatever dusty cartridge they happen to own as children. You could hand them a game where the only objective is to stare at a square until it blinks, and they'd say, well, you don't make them like this anymore. And you know what? Bless their pixel-loving hearts. In the case of Enduro, they have much more to work with. This game has a cult following that's less culty and more 8 middle-aged guys down a forum who still have their Activision patches framed above the fireplace. But those 8 guys, they will swear to you that this is the greatest driving experience since sliced bread was converted into a Hot Wheels track. And against all odds, they might not be wrong. Enduro isn't just a game, it's a lifestyle, a mindset, a long, lonely, grueling test of endurance where your only companion is the engine hum and the haunting realization that you just passed your 12th pixelated sedan and it's about to snow! And then you get to do it all again tomorrow. Now, outside of the Atari baptized faithful, Enduro barely registers in pop culture. No Smash Bros. Invites, no Funko Pops, not even a fake movie trailer on YouTube starring Vin Diesel. Oh, but it should. Imagine a gritty reboot, Enduro 2099. You, driving down your freeway, midnight alleys roam, dodging self-driving cars in the fog, then under the stars. The sun goes down, your Tesla catches fire, there's a crypto subplot. Honestly, it writes itself. So no, it's not replacing Mario Kart. Mario has marketing. Mario has memes. Mario has evil turtles and catchy soundtracks, Hollywood cameos. Enduro has driving. Literal drive. And maybe, just maybe, That's enough for one brave developer to say, yes, this is the 8-bit endurance racing simulator reboot nobody asked for, but everyone will pretend they loved back in the day. Overall, at first glance, Enduro is a game about passing 200 identical cars on a Mobius strip of existential despair, all while pretending you're not slowly becoming a part of the car seat. The road never ends, your opponents are immortal, and the weather system seems powered by a spinning wheel of seasonal depression. And you're the unpaid intern of motorsports, trapped in a Groundhog Day simulator where the only reward is more driving. It's Frogger without the optimism, pole position without the glory. It's a game that looked at your free time and said, you don't need that, right? And yet, somewhere between the blinding snow, the taillight ballet of midnight traffic, and the sad trombone sound of failure, Enduro becomes something greater, something purer, something kind of beautiful. Because once the absurdity wears off, you realize this is a game about endurance in the truest sense. It's about incremental mastery. It's about pushing past the crashes, resisting the urge to overcorrect, and earning every extra pixel of daylight. Each new day is a test of discipline and a chance to learn. By the time that little car morphs into a trophy, you're not just surviving, you're thriving. And sure, the patch might contain potassium benzoate, but the real reward is discovering that, even on the most infinite of roads, progress is possible. Enduro is tough, it's weird, it's great. And somehow, it'll make you feel like a champion. Next, we go to F. With caution. What's the matter, McFly? You chicken? If you only knew. Thanks for watching, and as always, see you next mission. Do you think we teased out the F? Good. We had a couple references to one F game, and a couple references to another F game. Both are third party. Oh, man. I think I kept it mysterious enough that oh, that's a good point. I'm not rewriting it. We'll go with this. They'll either figure it out or they won't. I'm hoping, like, most people are gonna think it's this one specific title, but a very small number of people think it's this other one. And I've already decided which one it is. But I kind of wanted to leave those hints and just kind of put teasers for both in there and see what they would go for. Alright, cool. Thanks, man. Take it easy. Catch you later. Now, outside of the Atari baptized faithful, Enduro barely registers in pop culture. No Smash Bros. Invites, no Funko Pops, not even a fake movie trailer on YouTube starring Vin Diesel. But it should. Imagine a gritty reboot, Enduro 2099. You driving down your freeway. Driving down your freeway. Midnight alleys roam. Dodging self-driving cars in the fog and under the stars. Okay, that. Jim Morrison is crying right now.